Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Happy holidays, TV Herstorians. You're in for a special treat today. Instead of doing that off-script viewing of old TV specials that were hosted by strong women characters like Judy Garland and Dolly Parton, we've done those over the years. This year, instead, we're looking at something that is a bit more recent and just as important in terms of representation and women characters brought to the screen in the made-for-TV movie called Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, which came to us in 2000. Now, when you think about animated holiday shows, you think about Frosty the Snowman, Charlie Brown Christmas, the classics, right? And invariably, there are more male characters than there are female characters. And, you do the math, but there aren't that many speaking roles or elements of the plot that are crucial to these women characters. Girl characters, usually. But with Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, we have a whole new take on storytelling and just a modest premise, actually, about how it is that it comes to happen at Christmas time. So the other thing about Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, which is animated and it's fun and it's a little quirky, and so you need not have seen it, but rather this episode of Advanced TV Herstory is sort of designed to maybe encourage you to give it a shot. Give it a shot when you're having to do something else anyway, but you can sort of follow a bit of a twisted plot and come to appreciate the fact that these characters are like none you've ever seen before. And it's 60 minutes long, so if you happen to see it on commercial TV, it's going to be more like 90 minutes. But I find it simply fascinating.
It's the world's most famous case of hit and run.
Whoa! Grandma, watch out!
You can say there's no.
Then the Spankenheimers learned Grandma was missing.
Get looking for the old Brad. Grandma's shoes, her medicine, her fruitcake.
She's been drinking.
Evil cousin Mel was.
Now, remember that this was brought to us by the WB. That's how it first premiered back in October of 2000. And wow, wasn't the world just a simpler, gentler place then? In 2000, the WB really was providing programming to, at that point, what you might call solid Gen X and millennials. There was a lot of programming geared toward young adults, teenagers, and even adolescents. And so you had the Gilmore Girls evolve out of the WB, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Living Single, so many different really great series that served the time and helped young people come of age. So it's not altogether unusual that they would take a crack at putting this very funky holiday song called Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer and build it up into an hour-long animated film. But they did. And they used the guy who had originally sung the song, Elmo Shroppshire, to really help create the story behind it. Now, Elmo Shroppshire, in addition to being a singer, and he has done all sorts of novelty songs. Wow, look him up. He's got quite a career. But his real career is actually as a doctor of veterinary medicine, which, oddly enough, is a fact that helps you better understand the plot. But for now, listeners, know that the 60-minute gem is worth your time. I'm not going to spoil it at all. I am going to give you a little bit of a plot summary because it is just twisted enough. But if you have seen it, perhaps you love it just based on this simple premise that there are two strong women characters or two primary women characters in the show, and they aren't necessarily good. In fact, you can kind of, we don't always have to be the heroine. We don't always have to save the day, but it's just great to see these characters. And bottom line, even if it isn't the best holiday movie that you've ever seen, maybe it becomes something that's a little quirky, a little American, and a little indicative of maybe what America was thinking in 2000. So here's quickly the plot. And that the two key women, Grandma, and Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, And Cousin Mel is the other strong woman character. Cousin Mel is voiced by Michelle Lee, who you may remember from Knots Landing and all of those Aaron Spelling shows. Oh my gosh, Michelle Lee and many, many episodes of Love Boat. So the plot is basically this. There is a family-owned store that's right in the middle of an urban setting called Cityville, I think. And the little store, it's a general store, Spankenheimer's General Store, is in the middle of what is now a very, very built-up business center of the city. And it's become a very attractive piece of property, in particular for the corporation that seems to have pretty much swallowed up all of the real estate around it. And Grandma, it seems, has been holding out on selling that property. Perhaps selling the property would mean that the store would dissolve, that they didn't really have a good succession plan. And that, to me, is a theme throughout this whole show. There is Grandma, and then there's Grandpa, but Grandpa seems to be losing some of his faculties, or at least that's what's asserted kind of throughout the episode. Grandpa does not present as the patriarch of what you would think of as a family business anymore. And instead, it seems to fall to Grandma a bit. So she's the heart and soul of this cute little general store that also has her son, we think, and maybe daughter-in-law running it a little bit, or maybe they have other jobs. And then there's two grandkids, Jake and his sister. His sister really doesn't factor in, and to be honest, neither does Jake's mother. They're just sort of there for window dressing. Jake becomes, in a sense, the protagonist. He's the one who ultimately figures things out and saves things. Long story short, Grandma did get hit by a reindeer. So Santa realizes he hits her. He takes her to the North Pole to recuperate, but she really doesn't recuperate. She has significant memory loss and is not found through parts of the plot that I will not share. In the meantime, Cousin Mel, who is clearly the antagonist, but you could say, well, you know what? All she's really trying to do is figure out how to transcend the family business to its next stage, whatever that might be, because that's what good planning is all about. But Cousin Mel, at least to our knowledge, really does want to sell out the property and thinks she can take all the proceeds on her own, which, well, there's a lawyer involved. One other female character is the lawyer. So Cousin Mel and the lawyer for the corporation are sort of, well, they communicate. They communicate at the same level, and they all seem to want the same thing, which is not what Grandma and Jake ever wanted. So the lion's share of the plot is all about Jake trying to figure out why his grandma just basically went missing, even though they were able to find the spot in the snow where she got hit and all sorts of other clues that, in fact, she seemingly was almost kidnapped. But nobody seemed to do a whole lot about it. And honestly, her son and daughter-in-law don't even seem to care, which is, well, that's just another thing. You know, it's like it was 2000. Weren't we caring? It's a great movie. It really is a great movie because it makes you think. And it isn't just steeped in holiday sap, which, you know, there's a time and a place for holiday sap. But young people are a little understanding that there's also other stuff going on and that there is a real world that lives in that month of December. This whole thing, I suppose, viewed through the eyes of somebody who isn't even Christian, would be even more comical and make even less sense than it does to people who are steeped in American religious tradition. Okay, so listeners, here's what I will say to you. Do not watch this Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer if you are really into that whole Hallmark Christmas movie sentimentality. It's not that kind of a film at all. And I'm using the word film loosely because it's a cartoon. Do not watch this 2000 gem if you are hoping to find smart fashion that bridged the animation fashion of the late 20th century with the early part of the 21st century. This was a pretty basic approach to animation. They don't vary much from the outfits. The colors are pretty consistent. Cousin Mel really only has 3 different things that she wears throughout the show and a little variation of color. And it really doesn't extol fashion, although there is some serious hair fashion going on. So that's a little on the fascinating side. You also get to see little gems like an early discussion of email and the use of a cell phone and a few other points of technology. So that's kind of fun. But do not watch this if you are hoping that there's going to be a sappy resolution to the conflict that forms the plot. It is not a sappy resolution at all. It's a little bit of a cheap wrap-up at the end, but that's sort of what makes it fun and something you don't have to think too much more about from the sappy side. You can keep thinking about all of the business and the legal maneuverings that sort of get glossed over, but if you're smart enough to be paying attention, provide a great opportunity for future discussion. Lastly, listeners, if you are looking for an animated film where you have men who are strong-arming the situation or are unlikable antagonists, the real villain, nope, you're not going to find them. The men in this are they're not quite afterthoughts, but they aren't nearly as strong as you might think they would be. Santa comes through in the pinch. Santa is the good guy that we know him to be. His wife, well, they can wear a mean red and white tracksuit when it's not Christmas time. But the rest of the men, Grandpa, the son, no. Jake does save the day. It's sort of that notion, well, as we knew all along, the millennials are going to get it done for us. However, listeners, do watch this. Do take a little bit of time out of your holiday viewing if you are looking for strong women characters who are presented in not entirely likable realms. Cousin Mel, who is, I think, also partly misunderstood. I think they could have gone a lot deeper into all of her background and her interest in the business and the fact that she's the cousin, not the child. And who was her parent and how was that person related to Grandma and Grandpa? I remain very curious about this. And then we have Grandma, who clearly Grandpa is failing. Grandma really needs to be asserting herself a little bit more as the matriarch of this family-owned business, but seems to have abdicated a little bit. And you can appreciate that because that's what real life is all about. This is, it's closer to the real thing, I think, than we would necessarily like to think of, given that it's sort of a cheesy animated 60-minute film from 2000. Also, if you are looking for an interesting plot versus something that's duly sappy, and I'm all about Garfield, the Garfield Christmas is as wonderful and sentimental as you can get, but this is a plot filled with twists and turns, and you might feel a little You Got Mail vibe from it. You might feel a little Miracle on 34th vibe coming from it. They, kind of graciously pick and choose from other plots, but it sort of weaves it all together to give it that sense of familiar and that you can remember all the rules about Santa and mail service, and letters that get sent to Santa and how do you prove that Santa's Santa and what does the judge say? Because yes, there's a lady judge in this movie. Listeners, do watch this movie if you are open-minded enough to appreciate that the quality of art ebbs and flows. In 2000, a bad song from 1995 that was played on the radio incessantly for a month, that this bad song evidently merited. Somebody thought, fine, let's throw some money behind this and let's make a animated TV movie. But every once in a while, that which starts out as only mediocre captures the public attention and becomes a little bit of a cult classic. So maybe this is a cult holiday classic, or maybe you just simply hate it and will never watch it again. But maybe you've enjoyed my talking about the very, very expansive thinking that goes on when you watch it. Lastly, and I will say this because this is what separates this 60-minute classic from all of the other 30 minutes, everything else that has otherwise become legend and lore in animated holiday shows. And that is the women who are the main characters. First of all, they are women. They are adult women. They are adult women with a certain amount of agency. They had power and they have some control. And Cousin Mel is not a good character, and that's okay. And Grandma should have been smarter, and that's okay to say that out loud too. She was Spankenheimer General Store's figurehead, however, and it was her duty to be planning for the future. So you can kind of get to the end, have a lot to talk about with a teenager or a 10-year-old even, because they are so smart today. It brings to light all sorts of, well, there might be corollaries in any given family or entity that makes you realize that the holidays are all about what it is that brings us together, even if it's sometimes a very corny, loosely knit plot in a fun 60-minute movie. Listeners, Advanced TV Herstory goes far and wide. We are not going to bring you the holiday standards because that's not where TV Herstory is made. TV Herstory is made in the character of Cousin Mel, who is out of the blue. She's something you've never seen before. It's well done enough that it will continue to survive, and it's just funky enough that it's worth a watch or two or three and can become a new tradition for you and your family. That's what we're about here at Advanced TV Herstory. As we head to the year end, I would like to thank audio technician Jen Eads for her faithful and patient assistance, video director Catherine Yang, who is always around and helping me deliver all of this content to a different level and in a different format. Find us online at tvherstory.com, and there you can figure out how to go about streaming. Go ahead and stream right from tvherstory.com. Just press play and listen. And please share that information with those in your family who aren't quite sure about podcasts, but they remember what it was like to listen to radio and maybe are ready to do that again. You can also stream us on YouTube and places where podcasts can also be downloaded. But I think what we're really finding is that podcasting isn't about the sophisticated use of technology to download something, to make it more complicated than it needs to be. Pretty much anywhere you find Advanced TV Herstory, you'll just be able to press play. And with close to 100 episodes in our archives, there's plenty of content for everyone. Lastly, we are on Instagram at Advanced TV Herstory and on Twitter at TV Herstory. In the meantime, listeners, enjoy this holiday classic, if you will. As always, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.